Thank you, Eugenia. It's great to be here. I'm Sajay Arthanat. I'm a faculty in occupational therapy, and I teach the assistive technology course in our core curriculum. And I also have a research program that studies how technology is implemented for people with disabilities and the aging in the community. So it's great to be here, great to be sharing some of my knowledge and expertise with you. So this is kind of an overview of what we're going to go over in the next hour. I will introduce the definition of what assistive technology is, and based on that definition, talk about the scope in terms of the length and breadth of this domain. And I think that's going to take up the bulk of the time, but later on I'll briefly go over how services are provided, some recent progress in the last decade, and also some ongoing challenges we experience in the profession. And I'll leave you with some literature and resources that you can help identify some of the topics that I'm going to talk about. So here's the very legal, federal, formal definition of what an assistive technology is. Now, I know that you may have some personal, professional familiarity with what it is. The definition is, I would say it's really wordy and abstract in a way, but what it says, suffice to say, it is about technology for individuals with disabilities. But there's a reason why the definition is so long, because if you break it up into components, what is it? It's any item, piece of equipment, or product system. So it could be anything tangible, anything, an object. And it could be acquired off the shelf. You could modify it within your clinic or home, and you can customize what you buy. And the core of the definition is that it must be used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of people with disabilities. So those four components are what I will use to kind of frame my talk today. So how does this play out practically? Here's a day-to-day example. So think of a hiking stick. Now, we may all need a hiking stick to trek Mount Washington, right? So does that make that hiking cane or hiking stick an assistive device? You would think so, okay. Well, yes, in a way, because we sort of assume that we don't now fit in a certain norm. Why can't we just go up, right, without it? So in a way, it's acting like that assistive device. But technically speaking, it's still a mainstream device, right? But think of that notion and think, what if I modified that hiking stick to make it look like a walking stick? And then let's say that one of my clients now uses it to take a walk in the park or out in the community. So that's really when what we see as a mainstream device transforms itself into an assistive device, and how everything comes together. So you need to look at the device, the person, and the context here. You add all three, you could really clarify that it's in fact an assistive technology device. So I have an interesting exercise where we go over a list of devices, and I'll let you choose whether they belong in the assistive technology world or not. Okay, there's a delay, sorry. So let's look at the people, the end users, who may be using assistive technology or could potentially use assistive technology. We are talking about more than 1 in 10 people in the United States, across age groups, across lifespan. And that's about 41 million individuals who maybe or potentially can benefit from various forms of assistive technology. And the type of technology I'm going to describe will kind of correspondingly fall in these disability types. And people with mobility, ambulatory impairments seem to be the majority here. And now the context. Where do these technologies originate? So a lot of them are from the medical setting, are provided through the medical settings. It may be hospitals, inpatient, outpatient, and skilled nursing facilities. And what's unique about that is that it's a short-term experience that people have with technology unless they bring that technology with them into the community. So it's very critical for therapists like us to look at how the technology gets integrated in the natural community context. And that's for us is the long-term usage that happens. So I'm talking about early intervention, schools, vocational rehabilitation, home health, and aging. This is really where the core value of assistive technology is realized. So why? The question of why. What is it used for? And again, corresponding to the type of disability. So technologies for mobility, getting from point A to point B. For communication, that may be for people who have wide-ranging speech, language, and hearing impairments. People with low vision or blindness, people who need to access their computers. And I'm talking about how someone can reach their keypad and the mouse, because that's integral to education, employment, leisure, social communication, you name it. And in the world of learning and cognition, I'm talking about people who may have trouble paying attention, processing information, memory, problem solving, executive functions. We can look at some technology there also. And technology to give access to the environment, especially for people who have significant disabilities, who may be confined to a wheelchair or a bed. How can they access different areas in their home? Technology for our day-to-day activities, as mundane as it may seem, but also very involved, intense activities. And finally, I'll share with you some driving and transportation type of technologies. So let's see what is and what is not an AT now that we are all experts at it. And some of them are really straightforward. Some of them are tricky even to us sometimes. So how about this? Is an elevator an assistive technology? How many of you say it is? Okay. All right. How many of you say no? Okay. All right. Anyone say it depends? Okay. I like that answer. It's always the safest answer. So in my view, it's not an assistive technology. The reason being that an elevator is not exclusively designed for people with disabilities. It's a universal design aspect of the environment. Both able-bodied people and people with disabilities can use an elevator. And it's not something that we own, we take with us. It's embedded in the environment. So I can see why you said yes, but technically speaking, it's not an assistive device. Okay, what about this? Is this an assistive technology device? Yes, 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 yes. And that is the most simple, common, popular form of assistive device that will fit the definition, okay? How about a gait or transfer belt? It's basically tied around the waist for our patients in inpatient, outpatient clinics to help transfer them. Would you say this is an assistive device in any way? Thank you, yes. It helps the caregiver or the therapist or the aide and not the person. So the facility owns the device, right? So that's what we call a therapeutic device or a rehabilitation device. It's not an assistive device. Okay, good. Here's a simple device. It's a white cane for people with blindness. Yes, straightforward. Okay. This is what's called a trans-electrical nerve stimulator, clearly a piece of technology, but it's used for pain, managed pain, chronic pain, sometimes nerve-related pain, sympathetic pain, and all that. Would you say this is an assistive technology device? Okay. All right. It's actually a rehabilitation or therapeutic technology because here we are talking about pain, not function. right? So it doesn't meet our fourth criterion or the third criterion as to increase or maintain function. Since this is meant to relieve pain, improve mobility, it may have some implications on function, but it's not directly used in the context of function. And a similar story is with this pediatric standard. This is where children with severe musculoskeletal neuromuscular impairments may require to stand through the day to stretch their soft tissues. So for that reason, it may seem like a mobility device, but it's not. It's, again, a therapeutic equipment. Okay, so we can do some tricky categories here. This is our word processing application. And let's say that you wanted to zoom in. Is that a form of assistive device, assistive technology? Okay. I heard depends. It depends. Yes, it depends. And the reason is that, yes, if I used it, I have corrected vision, so I may not qualify it to be an assistive device. But if I had severe low vision and I required the document to be magnified 200, 400%, then here you have a mainstream application transforming to function as an assistive device. And there's a message here that information communication technology, mainstream technology, can in fact be designed to serve individuals with disabilities. It's bringing people into the mainstream here. So there's a clear message for technology developers, mainstream technology developers, that by helping a quote-unquote sighted reader, by magnifying, you may in the process also help individuals with disabilities. A Segway as an AT device. Depends. Right? If I had arthritis, if I had a fracture, if I had a temporary ailment even, and I decided to use this for a while, it will serve as an assistive device. Same with an electric toothbrush, right? If I had a client who could not, if I had severe arthritis, could not grab hold of a toothbrush, or did not have the strength to manipulate the toothbrush, if this is what's used, it's an assistive device. So that depends, okay. Going back to the environment, is this type of a ramp part of the building architecture an assistive device? It's not. It's kind of the elevator thing, right? I know I'm going back and forth and confusing you a little bit, but this is where it's going to help me if I'm carrying a few grocery bags, or I have a stroller with a kid in it, or it may also help individuals with disabilities. But it's designed into the environment, it's embedded. So for that reason, it's not. But what about this ramp right here? Yes. Again, it's meant to serve somebody with disability. Okay. Sign language. Depends. It's not an item, it's not a product. Thank you. Yes, it's not tangible. It's a skill. It's a language, it's a skill. So I wouldn't consider it to be an assistive device. How about voice-activated assistance? Depends. Thank you. Yes. And again, if I have to set reminders, if I have limited memory, if I have to set reminders, if limited attention, then it's an assistive device. Same goes for the upcoming autonomous self-driving technology. There is so much in scope for not just us, but for individuals who may have issues with sensory regulation while driving, sensory perceptual problems, right? So there might be the future for individuals with disabilities. So enough said about the different types and differentiating what is and what is not. So let's go from why and venture into what type of devices might be out there. So before I begin, I want to talk about a hierarchy here, because the technologies I'm going to list might fall anywhere in this hierarchy. So we're looking at a pyramid where at the base of this pyramid, you have a lot of off-the-shelf, low-cost, easily available devices. And as you go up the hierarchy, you will see that the devices become more sophisticated, they become more expensive, and the service provision would require advanced clinical expertise. So that's really how it's divided up. So you may find very simple off-the-shelf devices you can buy from Rite Aid or a pharmacy, versus technology that you have to really have extensive assessments, evaluations, and customization and setup, which may go up, and it might require advanced clinical expertise. So let's look at mobility. We were looking at ambulatory aids, and these are crutches, canes, walkers, and this may be used temporarily if you have had a fracture, a trauma, but also in the long term if you have a mobility impairment like poor balance, frailty, and prolonged weakness. And this slide is a busy slide. It kind of captures all about different types of wheelchairs here. I'll do my best to kind of go over them. So we have 4 categories. There's dependent mobility, and that's for individuals who requires a bystander or a caregiver to push them because they don't simply have the physical or the cognitive capacity to do that. And then we have the independent manual mobility, starting with a very standard manual wheelchair. This is used for people who require to move very limited distances within a confined space. Very low cost standard wheelchair. And as you go up, it gets lighter and lighter. You will see a lot of the composite titanium-based materials that add to the cost. You go from the steel, aluminum to the lightweight, stronger materials. And these are wheelchairs that weigh below 30 pounds. It's used for people who want an active lifestyle, want to go extra distance. They have good upper body strength, good balance to transfer themselves, and they can independently take this in and out of a car or a van. In between, you will see an independent power assisted mobility, and what that is sort of a hybrid car. It's semi-power, semi-manual. So for someone who does not have good upper body strength or may have a lot of musculoskeletal ailments, but require some extra push. It's like one of those electric bicycles these days. So there's an in-hub motor in the wheelchair, and depending on how much force is required by the user, it gives the person an extra boost. This came into the market like about a decade ago, and it's widely used these days. It's becoming more and more popular. And then we have the full stream of power mobility devices, power wheelchairs. And again, this by itself is its own species because you may have different types of powertrains, you may have different capacities like for indoor-outdoor active use and all that. So there's tons of variety here itself. Finally, the scooter, which is not technically considered in the wheelchair category. Scooters are by itself its own entity. It's a wheel mobility device, but it's used for outdoors, technically speaking. So it's meant for limited ambulatory needs. People who need to go out, shop, or walk long distances may just use that temporarily. And again, an important subdomain of wheel mobility is it's not just about going from point A to point B, it's also taking care of the person's postural support and seating. Because a lot of people we work with will have significant neuromuscular impairments, which means that they cannot assume a stable, secure seated posture in a standard wheelchair. We need to provide them a lot of extra seating support. So our goal is to make sure they are comfortable, they have a good postural alignment, and we don't put them at risk of pressure sores because of sitting for prolonged time. A lot of them won't have the sensory and the movement ability to relieve that pressure. And finally, all this also should not hinder person's day-to-day mobility and function. So some of the devices we're talking about are pressure relieving cushions, a lot of seating support, seating accessories that we need to retrofit into the wheelchairs, custom molded seating, this gets really into the higher end of that pyramid, where it's really intriguing, and it can get very complicated to kind of get a person a custom molded seat. It's a very time consuming process. To wheelchairs that have tilt recline capabilities for individuals who may otherwise slide out of the wheelchair or require pressure relief by putting the pressure onto their back by tilting. So if you think about wheelchairs have remained the same since time immemorial. I know the material properties have changed, but all it is that it's a pair of wheels attached to a chair, right? So I think the technology is kind of taking on a different dimension. There are a lot of companies that are developing these exoskeletons, and what that allows a person to do is to have what I call a bionic feet or a bionic leg. So I'll break it up and play a short video. So most of the individuals you saw have had long-term spinal cord injuries. They've gotten back on their feet after 10, 15 years, long after being in the wheelchair for such a long time. So it means a lot to them. And what I heard is that the VA has adopted the ReWalk technology for veterans. And they are trying to process a service provision for that. All right, switching gears to communication. So the technology we term for allowing somebody to communicate who may have a speech language impairment is called augmentative and alternative communication. And that's, again, any piece of technology, high-tech, low-tech, that can replace a person's linguistic skills or augment the person's linguistic skills or speech. That's why the term augmentative alternative communication. So what I'm talking about are some low-tech devices. It could be like letter boards, phrase boards, where people can point and convey their thoughts and ideas. Or it could be picture boards. Sometimes it could be picture exchange systems in schools where children have different symbols, cards that they can hand over to you and communicate. So very low tech, going into very high tech devices that will have more options. It's embedded language in it, and you can go into multiple menus depending on the context, the subject that you're learning, the people you are with, it gives you a lot more infinite opportunity to communicate. So those are the high-tech devices. This could be a dedicated system like an AAC dedicated system. There are companies that make that. Or you can take your mainstream tablet and use AAC apps in them and make them into AAC devices. So again, I have a short video.
Augmentative and alternative communication, also known as AAC, is a way for an individual to communicate when they do not have the physical ability to use verbal speech or writing. AAC systems are designed to help people express their thoughts, needs, wants, and ideas. AAC can range from a simple set of picture symbols on a communication board up to a computer system that is programmed to speak with words or messages. AAC might be a temporary system that is used while a child's speech and language are developing, or might be the individual's primary means of communication for a lifetime. AAC is used by those with a wide range of speech and language impairments. Common causes for severe speech disability include congenital conditions such as cerebral palsy and autism. Also, many people acquire conditions that result in the loss of speech. Some common examples include amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease, head injuries, and Parkinson's disease. AAC can help people who are not able to talk at all. It can also be a helpful strategy if a child is talking but is difficult to understand. The use of AAC strategies can help children improve their ability to interact with others and to communicate better at home, at school, and in the community. Using AAC can also help decrease inappropriate behaviors such as crying or tantrums that are often due to the child's difficulty with communication. There are a wide variety of ways that people access AAC. Access is the way an individual makes selections on a communication board or speech-generating device. Some of the access methods used for AAC include direct selection by pointing or reaching, scanning using a switch connected to a device, head pointing, and eye control. Selecting the best way to communicate can be a complex process. It's important to get an evaluation by a group of professionals who are qualified to evaluate the necessary skills to use an AAC system successfully. An evaluation should involve a team of professionals working together. In addition to the AAC user and his or her family and caregivers, this team often includes a speech-language pathologist, a physician, an occupational therapist, or physical therapist.
So that kind of summarizes AAC, both the high-tech, the low-tech, and how different ways that people can physically access them. Because as you saw, it's not just the language. There is also a physical input that we have to create, a physical bridge that we have to create for them to access these devices. So they may either use touch to do that, they may have to use their head movements, their eye tracking ability. So whatever it is, the challenge is really to allow them to give them that physical access. So kind of a similar path we follow is allowing people to access their computers. So computer access AT devices may be hardware or software that bridge that physical gap that people may have because they don't have the mobility or the coordination to type on a keyboard or manipulate a mouse. And the challenge for us as a technology provider is that there are just tons of different devices. Making sure we pick the right device according to the person's whatever movements there are, and making sure that we find the right body site to mount these devices. That's really the challenge. So some of the devices I'm talking about are simple mechanical devices like a head stick, a mouth stick, an expanded keyboard that can be used with the head stick or the mouth stick or a hand stick. And these are expanded keyboards sometimes with key guard. And what the key guard is, it's a wonderful idea if you look at it, because if I have weak upper extremity, I can just rest it on the keyboard and I can slide my arm on that key guard and be able to press on those different keys. people may also require a trackball mouse sometimes. And that, again, you can compensate for the lack of not being able to move the mouse around. Instead, you can just roll your palm on the trackball and use your gravity to do that. So that's one of the commonly used devices. But for high-tech electronic adaptive devices, you may use an infrared head mouse. And what it does is that there's a camera that's tracking my head, a pointer on my head, and my movement would actually trigger the mouse cursor to move accordingly on the screen. If I don't have head movement, let's say I have a late stage ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease or some progressive motor disorder or a high level spinal cord injury, and all I want to do is move my eyes, or I can only move my eyes, I can use an eye gaze system. And instead of tracking my head, it can track my eyes and emulate that movement on the screen. If I'm only if I can speak clearly, we can use a speech recognition like the Dragon software. I guess it's a kind of a mainstream software out there. So recently there's been an app that's come up, or rather a device that will allow people to access their tablets similar to the computer. And all the infrared pointer, the eye gaze systems, those did not accommodate tablets. But now there's a new technology called the Open Sesame app, which I believe was created in New England area. I think it's the MIT. Terry's the next speaker.
Hi, my name is Brian Norton with the InData Project at Easter Seals Crossroads, and today we're going to take a look at the Open Sesame app that allows you to use head gestures to control your mobile device. So let's take a look.
Hey guys, my name is Shai. I'm with Sesame Enable. Sesame Enable is a startup company, and we developed an app that allows you to control your smartphone or your tablet using head gestures. And what we do, we're using the selfie camera you have on your tablet or on your smartphones to track the movements of your head. So it's not an eye gaze technology like you might have heard in the past. It's different. This is head gestures. So the selfie camera of the device is going to focus on the center of my head, and I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to do little gestures in my head with my head, and you're going to see the cursor doing the same movements as my head. Once I'm stopping somewhere, I'm not moving anymore. You see a green bar charging. This is our dwelling click mechanism. It will open an action menu, and I can do tap, I can do swipe, I can do any action I want, and you can use any app on your device. So our app can interact with any app on your device. You can go on Facebook, you can play games, you can write emails. Anything that you'll do with your fingers, you'll be able to do with simple head gestures. We have hundreds of users around the world, people with spinal cord injuries, ALS, MS, CP, muscle dystrophy, basically anyone that lacks the hand dexterity to control a smart screen. So I'll show you now on my tablet. This is a regular Samsung tablet, and I'll show you how I'm controlling it with head gestures. I'm going to use the voice command to start the app, and then I'm going to control my device with my head. So, okay Google. Okay Google. Open Sesame. Now I have the cursor on the screen that is following the movements of my head, taking it to the right, to the left, up and down. Once I'm stopping somewhere, you see the green bar, and I have my action menu. And I can swipe, I can tap, I can pinch, zoom in or zoom out, I can do more action, or I can just cancel. So if I want to swipe, for example, I'm just going to stand somewhere, I'm going to pick the purple icon, and now I have this line, I can just stretch it exactly like I would have done with my finger. So I'm going to do it again. Stretching the line, and I'm swiping. Again, stopping somewhere, I have an action menu, choosing swipe. Now I can use any app on my device. If I want to go play Angry Birds, I'm just going to hover over the icon of Angry Birds. I'm going to press tap. And now I can just play a game. again, everything with simple head gestures. If I want to go back to the home menu, just putting my head down. If I'm moving away from the camera or someone is blocking my camera, there is nothing you need to do. You just need to put your head back where it was before, putting my head back, and I'm getting back my cursor. If I want to Google something, I'm just going to press on the Google line. Now I have my keyboard, so I can either use my keyboard or just use the microphone. In order to use the keyboard, I have some more actions here, such as always tap. Now every time I'm dwelling somewhere, I'm going to tap. So just another way to write stuff if you are nonverbal or if you don't want to use the microphone. So yeah, that's about it. There are no limitations.
All right. Yeah, he picked the right game there, right? So this has just come into being, and I've seen the prototype of it come along, and I guess now it's available in the market. So it's a wonderful tool to have if all you can do are head movements. Okay, so going into technologies for vision. So for vision technologies to work, you either need the person to have some residual vision, they may have low vision. So in that case, the goal is for the visual aid to enhance their existing vision, right? Or if for individuals who are totally blind, legally or totally blind, we can use the concept of sensory replacement, where the technology will use their sense of hearing or touch and capitalize on those sensory modalities to allow them to function. So as I go along, you will find these two happening. So for wayfinding, think of this library, for example. You have 3 ways to look at wayfinding. You have an immediate environment, and that's where you're seated right now. Because if you have to get up and walk, go to the restroom, you have obstacles all around you. You've got to navigate. And then you have your local environment where if you leave this room, you got to go, let's say you want to find books or go see someone, go into a meeting room, the world just starts expanding into your local world. And then look at it globally. Let's say you got to go from here into Maine or Portsmouth or fly out of Logan Airport. That's your global environment. So how do we go expand our zones, really, if you are blind? So thinking of immediate environment, you have anything from our basic white cane that looks at, uses our sense of touch, our hearing as we tap, and use our sensory modalities, other sensory modalities to help us. But since the white cane has some potential limitations, right? It can't pick up anything that's above our waist high. There are certain blind spots, literally, if you're using a white cane. So what they have come up with is called an ultra cane now that sends light beams in different directions in an arc. And anytime that light ultrasonic beam is blocked, it'll send out a frequency, high frequency or a low frequency sound. And pretty high tech there. In the local environment, let's say I'm walking into this library. There's a concept called audio signage, where the library or UNH might have installed something like what's called a talking sign. It's an app. So the step here is another app. And these are transmitters you might plant somewhere in the entrance of the library. And as soon as I walk into the library, I have a receiver. And the transmitter starts talking to my receiver that you've reached the entrance, and here's the circulation desk, here's the elevator to the room. And as I keep walking, different transmitters keep sending messages to my receiver. I can pick and choose which one I want to which information I want to pick up on. So think of this as a public resource, right? If you have this built into different public infrastructure, airports, different transportation facilities, libraries, universities, schools, town halls, this will become a wonderful resource. Think of us even for sighted users of these facilities, where you can walk into a place, not know where to go. or you don't know what you're looking at, let's say in a museum, but you have this FM system now that's talking to you. So there's implication for all of us. It's such a wonderful universal tool that we can have. So that's been in creation for a while, but again, it requires public infrastructure. And then you have, for the global environment, you can use what's called a global positioning GPS, but this is way advanced than the GPS we have in our car. It has a lot more precision. It can lead you, guide you into even a specific room. So that's been in use for some decades, and it's really helpful for individuals who are blind. For accessing text and printed information, you can use different magnifiers, and it's not easily said and done. The challenge is to really identify the right level of magnification you need based on your residual vision. You may enlarge what you want to read, or you can enlarge different objects and interfaces, so that will also help. And then you may have what's called optical character recognition devices. So a device that's really been popular now is an optical character pen, where you can just slide the pen onto a book and it'll read out what's there. You may also use what's called a CCTV or a video magnifier, where you can slide a book or any hard copy material, and there's a camera projecting to that, and again, it can magnify to the level you want on a screen. For electronic information, if I am blind, I can use a screen reader. So basically, will speak out everything that's on the screen and help me navigate way down into the documents, way down into a different menu. Very popular with individuals who are blind. Or I can, if I have low vision, I can use a software like Zoom Text, and this again would magnify the screen exponentially, more than what the settings in your Microsoft or iOS application can do. Or I can use hard copy material, scan them in our Office scanner, and then have that read back to me. Another device that's one of my favorites is the Braille note taker. If you think of it, that's really a laptop or a tablet for someone who's blind, because you have those Braille keys, that's their keypad. And with using Braille patterns, they can type into it. It has speech output, so it'll read out what's in it, what they're reading, or it has a refreshable Braille display. That's the textured panel that you're seeing there. And what that is it's a real-time Braille display. The pins go up and down as you're reading. So it's almost like a hard copy Braille, but it has mechanical actuators that move as you're reading. So it's a wonderful device. It literally is somebody's laptop or tablet, all packaged into a small size, the size of an iPad mini, or it's pocket size. And then tons of products out there. Really, sky is the limit. If you have to look at for day-to-day activities, what devices might be helpful, anything from a product reader, an electronic measuring cup, induction cooktop, where safety is the key, that you won't burn your hand, bill readers, and even your simple home automation voice-activated assistants that you can now link to different parts of your house. So I don't have a prescribed set of devices here to show you. This is really, if you're a technology provider, I would say you have to be really resourceful, you have to be really creative, and you have to really be smart and careful in understanding the person's needs in how you search and identify some of these devices. For hearing, we are all familiar with hearing aids, right? And gone are the days where people had to wear the body-worn analog hearing aids. Now you have behind the ear, in the canal, and completely in the canal hearing aids. And these have digital signal processing, which makes the sound signals very clear. Because what should hearing aids do? It capitalizes on someone's residual hearing, and it has to do frequency-dependent amplification. Not all hearing aids are the same. One of the issues people have always had historically is the sound-to-noise distortion. which makes hearing aids very dissatisfying if it's not prescribed properly by an audiologist. So it's better to go with the digital signal processing hearing aids which are available now, which kind of, to a certain extent, remedies that problem. Hearing aids also have to be versatile. It has to do well when I'm speaking to you in a group. It has to be versatile when you are sitting in a crowded, noisy environment. It has to kind of clear out all the noise. It has to be effective when it's a quiet one-on-one environment. So really, digital signal processing allows you to do that. And of course, the aesthetics, people really are choosy about how it has to look. So when someone wears a hearing aid, you must be familiar with what's called an assistive listening system, right? In situations like this, if you are wearing a hearing aid, imagine this room to have an assistive listening system where it doesn't matter where you are seated, you can still hear me. Because it used to be that, sorry, you got to sit up front or close to a speaker in order for your hearing aid to pick you up. But assistive listening system brings about that inclusiveness where you're not told to sit in a specific spot. You could just come in, and my voice is kind of transmitted across the walls through a telecoil or an FM transmitter, and no matter where you're seated, your hearing aid can pick that up and convey that to your ears. So this is very much in use in public settings, in schools, meeting rooms, and so forth. And then you have, like I said, technology needed to control one's environment. This is, again, used for people who have very significant disabilities. I'm talking about high spinal cord injuries, quadriplegia, people with MS, ALS, traumatic brain injuries, where they could be confined to one spot, but they have this control interface now that allows them to pick up a call, operate their lights, TV, thermostat, door locks, air conditioner, etc. So these are things we take for granted being at home, but you only realize how critical those are when you are confined to one place, but now you have access to those. So I'm not going to play a video. I might be running short of time, but if you're interested, you can click that, and there's a video of a person with ALS who's really using all this. As an alternative, we are living in the world of smart home automation these days, right? All the smart hubs that we can buy and install in our house, connect them to a voice assistant like Alexa or Google Assistant, and you can tell Alexa to operate all these devices. It's great. Again, it's opened up a whole new possibility for people with disabilities. One thing I would caution is that there might be issues with access because they may not have the voice capability to talk to a voice assistant. They may not have the physical ability to operate a mainstream interface. There may be issues with compatibility. And some of the mainstream devices may lack in-home technical support. So for that reason, the dedicated environmental control systems are still in use for individuals who have very significant disability. But this really is, the smart home automation has really opened up an avenue for us. And again, for day-to-day activities, you have tons of low-tech adaptive devices, things to reach, shower seat, raised toilet, button hooks for dressing, universal cup for feeding, and different types of knives. Again, I cannot have a prescriptive list here. The list just goes on. It's really up to us as a technology provider to make sure we find the right one. Some examples of high-tech devices for daily living. We have robotic feeders now that can really align with your face automatically and find your mouth and feed you. Again, if you are that someone who has very significant disability and you require an aide or a caregiver to feed you. A recent robotic device is this robotic arm. You can buy it and retrofit into a wheelchair, and it can virtually do a lot of the manipulation and dexterity of what a human arm can do, like open appliances, retrieve things, get things from the floor. And so it's a matter of independence that we otherwise take for granted. We often work with a lot of technology and devices to help with cognition and learning. If you are looking at challenges with taking medications, for example, scheduling medication, you can think of something like a very low-tech pill organizer to a very high-tech pill organizer where you're told to take a specific pill and it's dispatched to you at a specific time through the device. It's connected to Wi-Fi, and a caregiver can actually program it from somewhere remotely. So it's very low to high tech, the continuum here. You may have a lot of time management apps that you can use. Our Amazon Alexa or a voice-activated assistant can help you manage your day. For students in schools or even higher education, if you have a learning disability or any type of a memory impairment, you could use a lot of note-taking recorders that you can play back later on. And this works as a notebook, but it's recording as someone is speaking. A lot of technology to help you read and write, organize your thinking, form a map, conceptual map of what you need to write. So again, sky is the limit here. For folks wanting to move around and drive, we have vehicle access and safety devices. So starting with devices that allow someone to independently transfer into a car. And again, this could be a very low-tech hoist to automated seats that can pivot and swivel and come down and pick you up. And a lot of modular ramps that you can connect to your cars. And sometimes there are cars that come built with accessibility. So again, there's the full spectrum there. But access is not just the thing. Safety is also important. So there's also a domain of technology that looks at how the person is tied down and restrained in the vehicle. The idea being that an individual with disability should also have the same safety standards as able-bodied people as you drive around. And then once you are in the car, if you want to drive, there are a lot of driving controls you can rely on. Pedal extenders, where if someone only has upper extremity mobility, you could basically access all your pedals with those extenders. You may have electronic steering wheel, where the steering wheel is now a joystick. You can control that. Or you may have a lot of mechanical adaptations for the steering wheel if you are one-handed, if you are an amputee, if you want to use like a prosthetic device to control your steering wheels, if you have arthritis, you name it. So a lot of options there. So I'm going to just quickly, briefly talk to you about how this all gets delivered, how the service is delivered. So you can provide service in multiple different ways. You can evaluate someone's needs for a device, or you can help them or you can help them acquire that. You can, as a therapist, you might help select, design, and fabricate these devices. Or if you think that my area is not in relevance to a specific type of AT, I can find another specialist who deals with that. So like somebody with advanced skills, I can just refer them, and that's still considered to be AT service. Or I may be the therapist who trains people who come with devices to my clinic, and I might be just training them to get used to it or get good at it, experts at it. This is a very multidisciplinary profession comprised of, again, I don't have an exhaustive list, but mostly represented by occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists. In school settings, we may have special education teachers, voc rehab, or counselors, or rehabilitation engineers. So if you belong or if you are belonging in a related profession, health rehabilitation profession, there are a lot of advanced certification, graduate courses that you can take in order to become an assistive technology provider. This just shows you the map of what an AT service provision looks like. From the time somebody walks into your clinic or your community center, all the way to what you need in order to make sure they are happy and satisfied and the device is integrated into your life through different steps. But without going into the details of those steps, what the hurdle you need to get across is right there, funding. And I drew it like it's a stop sign. You gotta stop and go every step of the way. So here we may be looking at one individual needing one device. And it's the same, it's that whole process. So when someone comes to you with a referral, you need to make sure they have some health insurance or some funding in order for me to evaluate them. Once I evaluate them, I need to again apply for funding in order to write up a recommendation for the device. And in that recommendation, I need to seek funding in order to purchase and implement and train the person with the device. I may need another funding request to bring them back and do a follow-up. So this is the same individual, the same device. So as simple as it may have seemed talking about this technology, in the real world, the service provision can get a little tedious and can be quite intricate. So talking about funding, these are common funding sources for devices. The majority of funding come from the medical funding sources, which is the Center for Medicare, Medicaid, and health insurance. So if you go with these sources, you gotta have a medical justification as to why the person needs these devices. If I tell Medicare and Medicaid that the person needs to get her higher education or go to a park, need to be active in the community, they're not gonna fund it. I need to talk about their medical complications, their body physiology or pathology that requires them to have this device. But there are a lot of other entities that may fund devices. If I tell them, yes, this person needs to be employed, needs to get higher studies. So there are a lot of options where I can create a functional justifications and get the devices funded. And also there's, of course, the out-of-pocket options. There might be personal loans, low-interest personal loans that you can get. So if I want to share you what's positive, there are a lot of innovations that are happening in information communication technology. A lot of big corporations like Microsoft, Apple, Google, they are getting in on this. So some of the technology they are developing, like the self-driving car, for example, these have huge implications for the disability community. So that's good news for us. There are a lot of international initiatives and coalition taking place through the World Health Organization. They are bringing together all the national associations in different national and continental associations in different regions and trying to have us work together. A lot of professional development and certification programs, accreditation bodies for making sure the programs have the quality and the rigor to train professionals. But a lot of barriers also. First thing is people still don't have the necessary devices and technology that they need. From a worldwide point of view, at least 1 in 10 people require a form of assistive device. So that's a reflection of what's here. It's all throughout the world, but very few of them have access to those devices. About 1 billion people will require an AT device, and only about 1 in 10 may actually get them. Funding has always been a struggle, and always with healthcare reforms and changes to healthcare, it's always a struggle to keep up. Requiring the physical and the societal access for people who have devices, right? They need the place, the context in order for them to integrate these devices. That's a work in progress. Education and training at the grassroots level has to happen. Very few undergraduate programs, associate programs really talk about assistive technology. So there's a lot of awareness building that needs to happen. Research and development is ongoing. There's a lot to come. And as a researcher, I'm always wanting to increase the research evidence, doing outcomes research to show these devices have XYZ benefits. So policymakers and public funding sources can use that, and we can justify that as a case for more technology development and funding. So here are a couple of the premier national organizations, the Rehabilitation Engineering Society of North America and the Assistive Technology Industry Association. There's lots of information, resource, position papers that you can, white papers, position papers you can get from them. And the WHO, like I said, is also coordinating how all this information is gathered and exchanged. And a textbook that I follow is the Cook and Polgar. I think our library has a couple of copies. It houses all the information I talked about if you want to go in depth. And I also listed a few of the journal articles where we frequent. All the recent research specific to some of the devices I talked about will appear in these journals. But that's not to say there are other rehab journals, health-based journals, where you will also find articles and research on technology. So that's about it in a nutshell. So I hope I can go deeper and then clarify some of what I discussed in our Q&A session. Thank you.